Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're excited to present a case study of the Battle Creek campus, specifically focusing on collaboration, wellness, and supporting project-based learning in K-12 facilities. My name is Ben Metz. I'm an architect with ESA Architects in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been working on educational projects for about 15 years now and am a graduate of University of Tennessee, Knoxville.
My name is Kira Barkley. I'm an interior designer with ESA. I've also been working on education projects for about 15 years, and I'm a graduate of the University of Kentucky.
So Kira and I were the lead designers on the Battle Creek campus, which we will introduce here in a moment, but it is a master plan for a campus that will eventually also include a high school and had a heavy focus on project-based learning. So our learning objectives for today, we want to talk about some of the strategies that we used to promote collaboration among students and faculty. We want to talk about some ways to incorporate wellness design features into schools. Hopefully you'll learn about ways to facilitate and support multidisciplinary learning, also project-based learning, and ways to design the building around that. And we want to explore some options for supporting different learning styles, including furniture and other special areas there. So we're with ESA. We are a multidisciplinary architecture firm in Nashville, Tennessee. We do a lot of education, healthcare, hospitality, a little bit of everything. We've been in business since 1961 and have about 195 architects in our firm. So quite a broad portfolio of projects. So to jump right into the case study, this was two projects for Murray County Schools in southern Middle Tennessee. And they approached us several years ago to really rethink their educational model. They had a new superintendent who came in with big dreams about really changing up the way that education is handled in schools, and also how to really rethink the way schools are built and how the students and faculty interact inside of those buildings. So we started this project the way we start many of our projects, with several listening sessions, listening to him and students and faculty about some of their big dreams and goals. The listening sessions, we really like to tell people to truly dream big. You know, for projects like this, some people may say, well, I want an indoor swimming pool, but you know, they don't always get everything that they ask for. But when we hear the big idea, we can call that down into an appropriate project that is within the budget, but also is really serving all of the needs of the budget and the school system. So you see some keywords here. Problem-based learning obviously is the largest one. Student voice and choice were two really big items as well. I won't read all of these, but really this was quite interesting to kind of hear different things from all sorts of different people, all the way up to school board members and county commissioners, and get their input on what this series of new schools needed to accomplish for the county. So first off, as a quick introduction to PBL, what is PBL? Well, it's a student-centered interdisciplinary learning style. And we really refer to it as a learning style, not a teaching style, because we want to support students in the ways that they learn and make sure that we are teaching to suit their learning styles. Often project-based learning deals with semester-long projects. A lot of times there'll be extended projects over multiple disciplines. So you may have a problem that students study, and you can study that in English class, and you can study that in science class, and even study it in economics or accounting or any other different subjects that we get into. So it's kind of a common goal and a longer term type solution. So how do we create architecture that supports PBL? Well, the first thing we have to do is get away from the factory model. This has been the way we've taught kids for literally forever. So you see on the left a photo from 1922. These kids look so thrilled to be in this classroom. And then in 2016, which is when we started planning for this school, not a lot has changed. I mean, it's a color photo, but you can still see some of the similar things on the walls, and really just not a lot has changed over that amount of time. And of course, this is a floor plan that kind of corresponds to probably 99% of elementary and middle schools in the United States. It is an egg crate. It has corridors. This one actually has some small spaces off the hallway, which is a little bit unusual. But it's really an egg crate, and it's a multi-story building with very little connection between the floors, no connection between the classrooms, and narrow hallways void of just about everything. So step number one, we've got to get away from that. So we started looking at a series of diagrams that we called Moving Beyond the Egg Crate. And you can see here diagrammatically what you saw before. You know, if you try to interact with students in classrooms around you, you've got to go out the door, down the hall, in the door next to you. And often that's disruptive because the building's not designed for it, the teacher's not expecting it, and the curriculum does not support that. So it's very self-contained learning. This is a photo I love. What's wrong with this picture? And it's really interesting. The teacher tried here, so it's not his or her fault that this is not as much a welcoming classroom as it could be. The architecture was never designed to support a welcoming entrance into this classroom. So it has a small window, it has some nice color. I love the Dr. Seuss graphics, but it really is not doing much to engage and bring activity from the corridor and into adjacent classrooms. So what if we actually created communities, learning communities that support collaborative learning? And we began to think about the idea of a front porch. In a neighborhood, you can sit on your front porch and it sort of creates a sign that maybe you want to talk to your neighbors or just see what's going on around you. So it's sort of that interstitial space between the privacy of your home and the public nature of the street. Well, we can use something very similar in an educational model as well. This promotes visibility and flow between the classrooms. So in the rear there, you see two classrooms with sliding glass doors that open up onto a central collaborative space. The door to the left is actually a teacher workroom, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. The door on the far right goes immediately to the outside. So really everything that a student needs is right here in this community. And there are three or four classrooms, depending on where you are in the building, that open up into each collaborative space. And then collaborative spaces are duplicated across the hall to create an overall community of 6 to 8 classrooms if you want to expand into a larger area. So diagramming that out just a little bit, you can see the circles, those are the collaborative spaces, and they open directly into those classrooms as you saw before. So we are removing the barriers. We're creating multi-zone spaces for different types of education. So you can actually begin to work in conjunction with your neighbor and begin to divide up students based on projects, based on different skills, and move in and out of these 3 classrooms or this collaborative space to do different things. And one thing that's really important here, we actually began to zone the school based on grades, but we left that zoning a little bit nebulous as well, because we know that in project-based learning, first grade, second grade, third grade really begins to matter less. And what begins to matter more is skill and ability and the way you learn and the way you like to mentor other students. So it's really an open way to design a building and allow students to mentor each other and move not just between classrooms, but between grade levels as well. So this was a fun series of photos. These are the glass doors that actually open up between the classrooms. and they're literally, we call them one touch. I guess it's technically maybe one or two touches to open these. But you can see on the left, it's a man door that opens in a standard fashion. And then with one additional click of a lever, it slides right out of the way. We actually did a series of tours among different schools that we had found that use different types of doors in this method. And several of them had garage doors that had to be raised and lowered with chains. And the chains are incredibly loud. The doors are a little bit heavy. Not every teacher is able to open them all the way. And to counteract the weight, they were geared in such a way that it took almost 45 seconds to crank on that chain and open them up. So we talked to administrators there at the different schools, and they all said, yeah, we never use these because it just takes so long to open and close them. They tend to stay closed. So we did a lot of research into different door manufacturers, and cost was also an issue. We did a lot of studying as to whether these should be floor supported or ceiling supported, and settled on this model, which was kind of the best of all worlds. So looking a little bit more at the diagramming, this series we titled Layer in Program Support. We know that schools are not just classrooms, so we began to think about how faculty might work in and amongst these different modules. And the green arrows, like I mentioned, are doors directly to the outside. PBL is extremely outdoors focused. And as we'll see in a few minutes on this campus, there was a beautiful creek running through the center of it. So to be able to go outside and get down to the creekside classroom and do other activities there in the courtyard was really important to the overall design of the school. So we're not just looking at the building itself, but we're looking at how the connection between indoors and outdoors can promote PBL teaching and what we can do outside to support those as well.
So here you see an early rendering of a learning community as we were thinking about program support and how these spaces could be used, and the amount of flexibility that was going to be needed in order for them to support learning in the way that they're intended to. We started to think about what needs to be provided in these spaces, whether that's storage, access to storage that is student-centered with the open cubbies that you see on the left so that they can access that easily, access to writable surfaces, and down into the details of the furniture. How do we make the furniture support the learning that's going to happen in the various types? So we focused on a lot of flexibility, furniture that's easy to move both by teachers and by the students, regardless of the students, in this case, fairly young age. And also how the students learn. So, a lot of the furniture that you see here allows them to take the physical posture that they might need to feel comfortable, or allows them to have mobility within the furniture itself, to kind of keep themselves moving, and learning a lot about how that helps students learn, and making sure that we begin to think early on about how to incorporate all of those elements within the learning communities themselves.
So this next series of diagrams, repeat and customize. So let's take those individual modules and repeat them as many times as we need to get the full capacity of the school. The elementary school was designed for 700 students, and the middle school was designed for 1,000 students. And one note about the hallway length as well. A lot of people think, well, if you have extra collaborative space, doesn't that mean you're building extra square footage? And surely this project cost a whole lot more than a comparable school. But what we actually were able to do, and it's even more obvious in the middle school, is we were able to shorten the hallway length and distribute some of the overall length of that hallway into the collaborative spaces. So it actually made a more efficient floor plan with more square footage of the overall plan usable for education and learning purposes. So as a quick orientation of the actual site, this is a case study of these two specific schools. So I want to make sure everyone understands the overall site here. So we have the elementary school here on the left, the middle school here on the right-hand side. This property is master planned for a high school in the future that has not been built yet. You'll notice the sports fields here. We actually went ahead and built all the fields that were necessary for the high school with the middle school so that they could share the use of that. We'll actually be building a couple more practice fields over here across the creek for the high school in the future phase. But the idea was to, in this phase, get all of the utilities on site, get the major road you can see running through the center, and all the infrastructure set for the high school so that it can be brought online quickly when needed. You can also see sort of a three-pronged creek running through the site. So that actually became one of the major drivers of where we located the schools on the campus. Obviously, we don't want to get too close to the creek for ecological reasons, but also quite a bit of that is floodplain. It's a little hard to see here, but the floodplain area is highlighted with a little bit of a white tone. So quite a bit of the site is open for, nice pastoral views and other outdoor activities, but we were fairly limited as to where the buildings themselves could go based on the floodplain of the creek. So looking at the zoning of the individual schools, this is actually a floor plan of the elementary school. So you can see in the top right, the green pods, those were a little bit more customized for kindergarten students. On the left in blue is second and fourth grade. And like I mentioned, those are sort of generic space planning terms that we used, but we know that these spaces can ebb and flow as the overall number of students in each grade changes and as students move back and forth due to skills and abilities. We put the shared spaces in the center. We want students of different ages to collect and interact, but we also don't want them sort of running over each other. So we kept a little bit of separation there, but brought some of the shared spaces there to the center of the plan. And of course, administration there next to the main entry as well. So this is a floor plan of the kindergarten and first grade area of the school. And you can really see here how the corridors are quite condensed based on the number of classrooms that they serve. And you can see the pods on the left have 4 classrooms, the pods on the right have 3. So there is some variety as well and opportunities. If the kindergarten had fewer number of classrooms one year than first grade, you can choose and kind of flex back and forth.
So kind of zooming in on that kindergarten, first grade typical classroom, as been mentioned, these are a little different from what's happening on the other end of the building, that's second through fourth, but still remain flexible between kindergarten and first grade based on their needs. So a couple of the elements that we focused on were having kind of multiple screens throughout the room, but particularly having a larger presentation monitor. We determined students of this age are a little bit less likely to use lots of screens. So we focused more on a teacher monitor here, but not necessarily having a front of room. So the furniture flexibility and the way the room is laid out allows the teacher to kind of shift where she or he needs to be at any given time throughout the day. The furniture and the abundance of writable surfaces allows for a lot of self-directed learning from the students themselves. And then we wanted to focus a lot on activity centers and messy learning, particularly with these 2 age groups and knowing how they learn best. So providing a sink within the rooms and also having lots of floor-based opportunities with the furniture and the flooring and things like that, allowing them to do that. And here again, you also see that access to outside within the pod. So that messy learning can actually move outside as needed.
So this is actually one of our early space planning diagrams. This one in particular is for the second through fifth grade classroom designs. You can see here multiple monitors per wall. It was an interesting conversation with the IT department when they started counting up the monitors. They said, "Wait a minute, how many students is this? How many classrooms?" And we had to really get them on board and convince them that this is not an overabundance. This is actually a well-designed system for supporting different content on different screens in conjunction with a presentation monitor to really achieve their overall video and educational goals. So this series, here you can see the original diagram with the doors closed and the furniture in a couple different variations. And then here is an example of the doors opening. They don't actually hide into closets. We felt like that wasn't really necessary to fully conceal the doors. So they sit and stack up in the side of the opening. And you can see a slightly different furniture arrangement here. We actually talked quite a bit about the front of the room. You know, does the classroom get a front of room? Does the teacher need a desk? Does she need a lectern? Does he need, you know, space to store his personal things? And so we actually settled on a lectern in our original planning with some casework behind it with a little bit of lockable space. By the time we got to final documents, each teacher did in fact have a stationary desk, and I think they appreciated a little bit of a landing pad. But based on the overall classroom design, teachers are still up and moving around and really engaging within the classroom.
So kind of zooming in on this classroom, it's a lot of the same concepts, just modified for the older age of the children. And like Ben mentioned, we do still have that larger presentation monitor that is teacher focused, but here you start to see the addition of more monitors. And while maintaining the flexibility of the furniture within the room, sort of syncing up some of that furniture with the monitors for small group use, that allows students to project directly to those individual monitors. This really reduces the front of room approach and allows visibility and mobility throughout the space. But we still have provided, as you can see, a lot of different options within the seating that allows kids to have choices in play. So whether you have a wiggler or a stander or a floor sitter, or somebody who just wants a normal chair, they have that flexibility to kind of rearrange and maybe even make a choice from day to day within this arrangement.
Yeah, so for my personal learning style as an introverted wiggler, I guess I would be sitting on a stool in the corner in this example.
So here's a rendering, not quite as early as the one we looked at before, but you can start to see how we illustrated this and also introduced the storage component within the classroom. So there's a lot of writable space, all magnetic. We do have a little bit of tack board, but trying to kind of marry that and have that dual function where it's writable, but you can pin things up, artwork, student work, things like that on those writable surfaces. Storage for students that is personal storage, but also on the right-hand side, you see those student-centric storage cubbies where things that are kind of makerspace-like, but that actually live in the classroom themselves are easily accessed by students as needed as they're in their self-directed learning. And then you really start to see the different options in seating and furniture arrangement. We have little stools that move, allow for movement. There you see the chairs, you also see the floor seating area with little carpet squares, and then beanbag chairs, kind of just that big variety starting to show up in a rendered format.
So focusing just a little bit on the middle school. The middle school is a two-story design. It's actually, it's sort of built into a hillside. So we had some unique opportunities for multi-level outdoor spaces. This begins to show one of the neighborhoods for the middle school. So each neighborhood is actually a two-story design. So similar grades are on the first floor and the second floor. And each pod actually has a connecting stair with glass to the outdoors. And once you move down the stairs, you can move directly into a courtyard right off of these individual collaborative neighborhoods. And also at the middle school level, students are beginning to more use these kind of as a homeroom, and they don't spend quite as much time throughout their day in these individual classrooms. So we're actually able to make these rooms a little bit smaller. Once again, give some of that space to a collaborative space here. But we also distributed that space throughout the school in some more centralized collaboration and hangout spaces that we'll look at here in a few minutes. But specifically for these neighborhoods, you can see there in the center, once again, some doors that slide back. And so from each classroom, you can really begin to see directly into this collaborative space here in the center. The collaboration space has writable surfaces and also a wide variety of furniture to support different learning styles and different activities. And so these 5 classrooms can really begin to work together in that central space. A couple of these pods actually had science classrooms in the central position that the doors opened up so we could actually begin to use the science classrooms as the sort of landing pad of a larger overall project that could spill out into that collaboration space. This is a view of the overall middle school. The entry is here in the front in the middle. This is a 1-story portion of the school as the site is higher at the front, and then the site actually slopes into a 2-story position here at the rear. So that also gave us a great opportunity. Once you come into the building, you have a nice generous lobby. You have a large connecting stair that moves downstairs, and also a railing that overlooks more public space as you access the gym and practice gym in the more public areas of the school. Another thing that we were able to accomplish with the specific site condition is this building actually has no fire stairs. So there's a central sort of collaboration and connectivity stair, and then there are stairs in each of the student pods in blue. One of them actually does have a 1 door, so it acts as a fire stair, but it's very open, very inviting. We know that stairs is actually one of the places on our list of spaces where bullying begins to happen. So the more open and the more inviting those spaces are, the safer students are within those spaces. One other thing to note here in Murray County, 5th grade is actually part of the middle school curriculum. So you can see that space in green. And we actually modeled those directly off of the pod design from the elementary school and duplicated that onto this position of the school. The blue are the more specific to the middle schoolers that we looked at in the last slide. So it actually gives the 5th graders a little bit of an opportunity to be separate over here in their individual wing. They have a classroom style and a learning style that they're still familiar with, but they're beginning to slowly integrate into middle school. Once again, the yellow is administration. The orange is central public spaces. So this is a floor plan of the middle school. Students are also beginning to deal with more autonomy at this level. So we didn't have specific faculty workrooms directly off of each pod. You can see one in the center so that teachers can come to that position and do some work if they need to, or provide some one-on-one tutoring. But really, we're beginning to give students more autonomy, more room to roam, and just more independence in general. So this is a view of the middle school collaborative zone, really similar theme to the elementary school, just updated strategies here. A little bit bigger furniture, of course.
So starting to take a look at that specific design for the 6th through 8th classrooms. As Ben mentioned, the 5th grade classrooms are sort of a duplication of what we saw in the elementary school. But here in the 6th through 8th classrooms, you start to see a lot more independent learning and self-directed learning, some group work, but still independent from the teacher. So we do have the presentation monitor here. We have monitors throughout the space for visibility for students. It allows, instead of the lecture style row after row where everybody needs to be in a specific position to be able to see the screen, we can do a more collaborative approach with the furniture, as you see, and everybody still can see what's happening as the teacher is projecting what they're working on. But the tables are, if you see in the photograph, the tables are still individual. So if you have a group of 4, that works. If they need to expand that into a group of 6 or decrease to a group of 2, that flexibility is there. And they have access to be able to see the presentation monitor and access to whiteboard walls all the way around the perimeter of the space.
And one thing to start noting here that we'll look at a little bit further in the presentation is natural light. Everybody knows that has worked on school design, wall space is a premium. So whether it's windows or writing surfaces or storage cubbies or presentation monitors, you really have to balance all of those things. So here in the middle school, we actually reduced the size of the exterior windows just a little bit to accomplish our overall goals for other wall-based functions. So let's talk about the media center just a moment. What's a media center anymore? I think a library is probably the most heavily questioned and the most flexible space, and potentially even a space that people wonder, where's it headed? What's it look like? Do we even need it anymore? So we actually had a lot of fun working on the media center in this school. As the center of a PBL curriculum, we knew that it was far beyond just a space to store books. And actually the number of books is even less than we originally anticipated when we were designing the space. So it's truly really becomes the heart of a PBL curriculum, and it's located at the heart of the school, right off the lobby, with lots of glass and connectivity. Like any good media center, there is a space here for kind of a story time space. So we can actually get 3 different classrooms together for a presentation. And of course, on the left, we see some cubbies. Students love those, providing different areas for them to be by themselves or read a book together with a friend, and also provides some general space separation as well. So looking at the plan of this space, one thing we were told right off the bat is, based on the school's budget, they would only ever have 1 librarian, but they wanted 2 media centers. So we said, let's combine them, but let's put the control position at the center so you can see both directions and provide support to both the younger and the older students, but create a little bit more of a separated space as well. So you can see here in the center is that story time zone, right off the lobby, right off the main entrance, with the younger students happening or having their space on this side and the older students in this direction. You can see 2 maker spaces, 1 for each grade. These were anticipated to be sort of robotics, Raspberry Pi, those types of programming and computer-based maker activities. So we actually did not plumb these. They're more of a dry lab type space. After they started using them, they said they actually wish they had some sinks in there just for some messier activities. But I think they still also use them for those robotics type activities as well. Here's a couple views of the media center. You can see directly into that makerspace there. Lots of pegboard on the wall, lots of space to store projects and materials. And this is one of the spaces, each of these within the school, where students can actually begin to host semester-long projects. So you can actually secure the door when necessary so that things can grow or age over time, depending on the project you're working on, or just sit in between work sessions. So you have a secure space for that to sit and land throughout the semester. On the right, there were several spaces throughout the school where we actually color coded the different utilities, once again, providing a learning opportunity. So you can begin to talk to students about fire suppression and hot water, cold water, different air movement. We also, in the school, all of the server rooms had glass doors and they were lit so that you can see into those rooms and see the computers and not just hide those behind solid doors. So really trying to create educational opportunities in the building as well. This is a plan of the upper school or middle school media center. We actually put a STEM lab directly in the media center here as well so that they can have an even larger version of that makerspace. It can be used for separate classroom time. It can be used for a larger STEM lab, or it can be used in conjunction with other media-based projects. Interestingly, during design, we created 4 cubbies with different furniture at the top left of the media center. And the administrator said, whatever you do, don't give us a storage room, just do furniture-based storage inside the room. And of course, during construction, they then said, well, where's our storage room? We have to store things. So one of the cubbies actually got turned into a little bit of a storage room up there in the top left. But it's always good to be flexible in design and be able to make changes like that as curriculum changes or as different people change their minds or see things differently over time.
So in addition to the media center being sort of the hub of the school and the place where students from different classrooms come together and work on projects that are from different disciplines, we wanted to think about opportunities to do that throughout the entire school. So we came up with a couple of different ways to handle that and thinking about using both larger spaces and smaller spaces. So here you see a rendering, an early rendering of the corridor on the kindergarten first grade wing and bringing a life to that corridor and a place where classes and education can actually happen. The corridors are a little bit wider here to allow for that, to allow for a gathering of students. And so you actually see artwork being displayed, but it could also be a place where students could come together with a teacher and learn. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you see the backside of the cubbies that we saw in the media center, but we used the backside to provide a writable surface and desk or tables so that students could actually have a class here. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you see the art room for the elementary school, which has a glass garage door that actually opens onto a patio space designed specifically for that art classroom to be able to move in and out of the classroom as needed.
Yeah, and one thing I'll note here as well on the left-hand side, when we were initially laying out these schools, we had a lofty goal of creating a school with no corridors whatsoever. Because in our minds, we said, you know, what's worse than a big blank corridor? Well, we actually thought that a little bit. Each school has a storm shelter for tornadoes or other bad weather situations. So we were actually able to craft 2 storm shelters into each school. And those did become a little bit more of an enclosed space. But as you can see here on the left, Kira did a great job of making even the most blank corridor interesting with different wall features there. So this is a view of that STEM lab that is in the media center. So you can see lots of light off to the left. Once again, this is a space that students can use as a landing pad for longer term projects and is used for some classes, but is also open and available in between other classes as well to go and use as a study hall or a project-based room. On the right, you begin to see one view of the connecting stair in the center of the school that connects the lobby down to the athletics and cafeteria area of the school. And we had a lot of fun designing this in a way. We actually brought in some students and talked to them about it and said, you know, if we had a stair where you could stop and sit, what would that begin to look like? And so they enjoyed having some input in that, and it really became kind of a central feature to the school itself. In general, we really feel like schools over the last 50 years have begun to actually get more boring, and cheaper materials and lots of thought towards long-term durability. And those are important things. Budgets are realities, and durability is a very real thing. But we wanted to give students a sense of ownership and a sense of place, and owning something nice, being in a space that inspires them with natural light and not designed down to the minimum square footage everywhere. Kids love to run around. They need space. They need all sorts of different things within a building. So just creating something nice. We still use very durable materials. Quite a few of the classrooms are just painted cinder blocks. Even the lobby, there's some cinder block area. We also brought some exterior materials inside for their extra added durability. So we really tried to balance that, extremely tight budget with something nice and inviting. This school, over the past couple of years, we've been lucky enough to win several awards, both for design, for educational space, and for all sorts of different overall subjects, interior design as well. But as lofty as our goals were in the beginning, not everything came to be. So here I actually wanted to highlight a few things we didn't get to add into the project. In the top right, you can see some tall roof section with some roof glass monitors that would have allowed more light down into the collaboration spaces. That was something that unfortunately the budget didn't allow for. We also had some ideas about creating really specific outdoor learning zones. You can see the campfire ring and the amphitheater style learning. Those were not nixed entirely, but they were deferred and will likely be built in the next couple of years, but weren't able to afford those right off the bat. And on the left, you see there in the center, the door that opens up to the art classroom and also goes into the central portion of the school. So we wanted to include some outdoor roof area and a seat wall and a larger patio here for those craft projects to move outside. And the patio and the seat wall will happen in the future, but are not there yet. So it's not a bad thing to weigh different things along the way and take some things back out of the design, but be proud of what you're left with and make it the best you can.
So wellness is obviously a hot topic in any market segment, any design segment, but certainly in education, it's a very important part of the education of students and their ability to learn in general. So there are a couple different wellness topics that we addressed with the design of these projects. The first being natural light and its impact on circadian rhythm and focus and a student's ability to learn better in general. So we ended up with projects that are really pretty flooded with natural light. And in order to get to that point, we focused on a couple of key elements. We used a lot of reflective surfaces from a standpoint of color. So there's a lot of white, there's lighter colors. We focused our accent colors in strategic locations so that they would have impact, but allow for the space in general to feel lighter. We have a lot of large windows with access to views. We were really blessed with the location of this campus. It was a farm before it was the campus. And so as you can see in the image, there's a lot of great views out the windows. And then all of that glazing obviously lets in a lot of natural light. It provides the teachers with the ability to adjust their artificial lighting as needed within the space. If you've worked on education, you've probably been in that classroom that is just a few, table lamps that a teacher's brought in from home with no overhead lighting on at all. And so we wanted to combat that by giving them a lot of access to natural light, as well as introducing LED fixtures that they could dim as needed. And using multi-story windows in public spaces, as you see in the middle school in that center image. Again, just really trying to borrow as much of the natural light as we can from outside. and focusing not just on the student spaces, but the teachers as well. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't just provide access to the natural light and the things that we were, allowing for the students, but wanted to carry those into spaces that were dedicated to teachers as well. So you can see there where we've really kind of accented that corner with natural light in a space that is really teacher focused.
Yeah, in the schools that we toured with this group in particular, but I think also in every school I've ever been in, I've never seen a teacher workroom. I don't think I've ever seen one with a window, and I've definitely never seen one with floor to ceiling glass. So the teachers were very appreciative of the natural light in their spaces too. So it's not just the students, it's the teachers you have to take care of as well.
Here you see, another example. These are both from the middle school. The image on the right is sort of one of our favorite rooms. It's actually the band room at the middle school. And so we have this big, large volume, that was there for the acoustics of the space, but it really allowed us to bring all of this natural light in. We use a lot of light colors to get that light reflectance. And it's really sort of a great space to be in. It feels like a great space to be in. And so we went in, we really love that space. And on the left side, you see that stair access that Ben mentioned before within the pods in the 6 to 8 age range or grade range. But that stair access allowed us to really add a lot of glass and natural light on the courtyard side of each of those pods, which then comes all the way through into the classrooms and the learning communities, and lights up all of those spaces as well.
So access to nature, we've talked a lot about that. Like Kira mentioned, this site was really just amazing to create a campus. It was an old working farm, has amazing views and lots of pasture land as well as some wooded areas as well. So as we mentioned, each pod directly accesses the outdoors, and then even some of the central spaces, you can get to the courtyard. We actually carved out a little bit of square footage so you can get directly from the central corridor to the outside as well. We fought hard for that so you can get from the cafeteria to the central courtyard without having to go through a classroom. And this is a overall view of the elementary school. You can tell it is largely designed around that central secured play space. Each room has easy access to that. And then of course the creek is down to the left with a future outdoor creekside classroom planned for down there as well. And an overall view of the middle school. These work just a little bit differently with the two-story arrangement at the top, but students can move down the stairs to their central courtyard for the older students. And then the fifth graders actually can move from their pods to a play space out front as well. So separated outdoor spaces as well as indoor spaces. And this is a view of that overall campus. You can see the entry to the bottom right. Lots of parking with overflow parking, and then the students actually that arrive by bus arrive at the top of the page so that they can queue in different areas and wait for the bus or their parents in different spaces.
So health and movement are an extremely important factor when it comes to wellness in education for both the physical and the mental learning and well-being of students. So there were several things that we did, both big and large, to try to incorporate health and movement into just the everyday use of the building. Obviously, a gymnasium is a dedicated space for learning about health and movement, but we wanted to incorporate details that would allow for that to happen maybe when students didn't even recognize that it was happening. So the stair that we added, this stair that you see on the right-hand side, that is kind of that communicative stair that is big and bold. For the students at the middle school, it's got little spaces where you can gather and have a class, but it really promotes use of the stair. And that's the important thing about adding both this stair and not having fire stairs at the middle school. When it's not required to be the fire stair, we can really open it up and make it inviting and make it something that students want to use. And that kind of inherently promotes that movement from space to space. And then as we kind of drill down into the details, we mentioned before, particularly at the elementary school, providing furniture that allows for movement, even down into that little bit of just kind of wiggling while you're sitting there and keeping that body going. It helps sometimes them focus their mind, but it also keeps their bodies moving. So you can see the stools there on the left-hand side in that middle picture actually are not flat on the bottom. So they allow for that little bit of wiggle and movement. And then just the connectivity of the spaces in general. The way they move through the corridors, being able to move from a classroom into an adjacent space and be up and moving around, but without interrupting the learning, allows for those things to be incorporated in the everyday activities within the school.
And a quick note about COVID here as well. Here in 2020, obviously we're in the middle of dealing with this pandemic, and we'd be lying if we said that we designed this school specifically with a global pandemic in mind. But we have found that some of the features that we've incorporated into this school actually have begun to give them a little more flexibility as to where they put students and how close students have to sit together. With these collaborative spaces, they can spread out a little bit more. And we all know that flexibility is key when you're dealing with unknown situations. So the school has actually found that it works quite well, even in these interesting times.
So one last component within the wellness category that we wanted to address in the schools was integrating the special needs program. So we thought about what are the ways that we can reduce the stigma related to being in a special needs classroom. And one of the first best ways to do that is to distribute the classrooms throughout the plan for the times when students need to be in a separate classroom. So rather than having them isolated within a specific wing or their own pod, we located the special needs classrooms sort of one per pod throughout the building so that those would be evenly distributed. They are specifically designed for the needs of those particular students, but those changes are subtle. There's not necessarily anything that you would automatically realize when you look into those classrooms that indicates that there's something different happening in there. We did use some specific paint colors, particularly in, we have some rooms called calming rooms. They are not the size of a typical classroom, so they're a little bit different already. And we did kind of think through paint colors and finish colors in some of those spaces to allow for a more calming environment, and address restroom needs within some of the specialty classrooms, the special needs classrooms. But again, all of that is subtle and not immediately visible throughout the rest of the space. And one thing that we did specifically in these classrooms, we did discuss doing it throughout the school, but for budgetary reasons, only integrated it into the special needs classrooms, was to provide color changing LED lights with control panels. So instructors can adjust the temperature of the light in addition to the brightness of the light as needed to assist with student behavior, student learning, anything that they might need throughout the day. They can do that with the touch of a button on the wall. And I think in the future, that's something that, and particularly in this district, and I think in general, we've heard a lot of people really wanting to try to explore doing that in all classrooms because of the benefit of being able to change those light colors.
So in conclusion, we hope you've enjoyed a little peek into the Battle Creek schools in Murray County, Tennessee. If you're ever in the area, they have a great group of students that have an entire tour set up, and they love giving tours of their building. So be sure and check it out if you're ever down there. So hopefully we've covered all the learning objectives, specifically project-based learning, wellness, and supporting different learning styles. Normally at this point, we'd take questions. In this format, of course, we cannot do that. So in the introductory part of the website, our email addresses are there. So if you would like to drop us a line and ask us a question, feel free to do so. And with that, we will close out, and we thank you very much for joining us.